Alright, what is happening, guys? AMG here at Warrior Bet MMA on Twitter and pretty much everything else. UFC 247 happening in Houston this Saturday. I believe the first fight starts at 5:30, and it's a pay-per-view weekend. It's a kind of an underwhelming card if you ask some people, but I think if you put the time in and actually research these fights and look at these fights and you love betting, I think the time you spend looking at these matchup and predicting and projecting, it becomes that much more fun despite people calling this fight a low level fight, that fight a low level fight. It makes it all the more interesting, at least for me personally. When I invest time, I look at the matchup and I predict what's going to happen. Even if I don't bet the fight, I think every fight can be exciting if you put some time in on it and just see how it plays out. So yeah, underwhelming card for some, for most, but I won't be complaining. I'll be there in attendance. I should probably have a buzz before the first fight even starts. So I probably won't be on Twitter too much this weekend, but yeah, there's 12 fights and it should be a fucking fun card for me at least. I hope everyone else. So let's get started with the first fight of the night. Austin Lingo, 7-0, fighting Youseff Zalal. He's 7-2. This fight is at 145 pounds. This was kind of a weird fight, or kind of weird how it came together. I believe it was only announced 2 weeks ago. For a while there, I was sort of confused because Marlon Chito Vera was supposed to fight Jimmy Rivera. That fight fell out because Rivera had an injury. And then Alex Morono was fighting Diego Lima. That fight was sort of up in the air because Lima had to pull out with an injury. So for a while there was only 10 fights on the card. And I was just kind of curious, are they finding replacements for Chito? Are they finding a replacement for Morono? So I think that's where this fight sort of came into play. Cheeto's no longer on the card, so we have Lingo versus Youseff Zalal. And as far as Austin Lingo is concerned, lights out. That's his nickname. That's exactly what he goes in there and tries to do. He tries to put his opponent's lights out. He's fighting out of Fortis MMA. He's fighting out of Dallas, Texas. Maybe that could be a factor here. Maybe it won't matter. So he's a hometown kid. He's fighting in his backyard. As far as the taping went for Austin Lingo, a lot of his fights ended in the first round. A lot of his fights ended early. So it's kind of hard to gauge his overall game. I saw bits and pieces of his grappling. I saw bits and pieces of him on his back. I saw bits and pieces of him defending takedowns. And like I said, just overall it's hard to project who he is as a fighter. You have so many first round knockouts, you don't know who he is past the 10-minute mark. You don't know who he is past the 5-minute mark. So especially considering that, if you consider that and then you consider, or you look at the line and how it opened up, you see Austin Lingo opened up, or this was an absurd line. Bet Online actually opened this line. And they opened Austin Lingo at minus 500. For a second there, you could have got Youseff Zalal at plus 375. Youseff is down to plus 165 on 5 dimes. So it's outrageous the way Bet Online opened them at that price. And I figured this is the way the line was gonna move. Like I said, all the way down to plus 165 on 5 dimes, and rightfully so. Like I said, it's hard to put a pin on who Austin Lingo is as a fighter. Don't get me wrong. It takes some serious skills and it takes some serious power to put out guys at 145 pounds. I believe 5 out of his last 6 fights have finished in the first round. He's an undefeated fighter. He's finished 5 guys in the first round, his last 6 opponents. He's only gone to decision twice in his career. His amateur record was 3-1. 3 wins via knockout, via finish. Now, I could not find, what fight was it? I wasn't able to find the Phil Gonzalez fight. That was at LFA 40. But I did find the Charles Williams fight that went to decision. That was in 2017. And I think as the fight progressed, when we got past that 1 minute mark, or the first round mark, and I think there was another fight to where he finished via armbar, I believe it was, or he submitted off his back. Or no, it was a guillotine, Josh Foster in 2018. Well, as far as him going to decision, I honestly didn't like what I saw after the 5 minute mark. He's a really good boxer, don't get me wrong. I believe he has a background in boxing. I believe he was an amateur Gold Gloves winner. Don't quote me. But obviously he's boxing there. Obviously he's got power. But the biggest question lies, who is this guy once it gets out of the first round? And I didn't like what I seen. Like I said, it was very small moments, very few moments. But when I did see his grappling, when I did see his takedown defense, I didn't like what I saw. And if you compare it to, or if you match it up with Youseff Zalal, I think Youseff is far more versatile. He obviously has more tape on him, so you get a better picture in your head as far as who the fighter is, because obviously this guy has more tape out there. But he has 2 losses in 2019. I think that's part of the reason maybe BetOnline opened Lingo at -500 off the bat, but I don't think that matters here. Those guys that he lost to are wrestlers. Those guys that he lost to are very good fighters. Matt Jones probably not necessarily, but both of those guys push a wrestling pace on Youseff, and you'd have to be crazy to think that Austin Lingo is going to push that kind of fight versus Youseff. So, if anything, it's going to be the opposite. If anything, it's going to be Youseff Zalal pushing that kind of fight to Lingo. So, not that you can completely dismiss these losses, but as far as the matchup is concerned, I don't think these losses mean much. So, when I looked at Youseff Zalal, we really got to see everything in his arsenal. We saw him wrestle. We saw him defend takedowns. We saw him flying knee guys in the first round. We saw his counter game. We saw if his opponent gives him space, how does his striking look? We've seen it all. And I think the versatility edge is by a large margin on Yousseff's side. I think he's a good kickboxer. I think he's got good offensive takedowns. I think he's got better jiu-jitsu. So, I mean, just that alone makes me feel like the value side is definitely Youseff here. Now, that's not to say Austin Lingo can't go in here and finish this dude in the first round like he has the rest of his opponents. But Zalal is going to have a height advantage. He's going to have a reach advantage. And another thing that kind of stuck out to me is if you go back and watch the Daniel Soto fight, Youseff Zalal versus Daniel Soto, 2018. It was kind of a similar matchup. Daniel Soto was primarily a boxer. He went in there. He tried to take Yousseff's head off, primarily with his hands, primarily with pressure and boxing. And if you watch that fight, you see Youseff doesn't engage in that kind of fight. He ducks under the wide loopy hooks, and he shoots in for a takedown, and he fights it smart. He plays it smart. So, yeah, just his overall game, and I'm able to see a lot more of who Youseff is on tape compared to Lingo. So, in my opinion, it's kind of hard to bet a -200. What is Lingo right now? -190. So, yeah, it's kind of hard to bet a -200 when you don't know who the guy is. I mean, we've seen hype trains get derailed. We've seen it time and time again. So, I think the value side here is Youseff Zalal. I think if this fight gets extended, we're going to see Youseff Zalal have more weapons. We're going to see him utilize more. He's going to have a bigger arsenal, is what I'm trying to say. I wouldn't put it past Youseff if he goes in there and wrestles this guy. It's going to be hard for Lingo to cut off the cage against this guy. I really like the lateral movement of Zalal, so I think once Youseff gets past the 5-minute mark, Lingo's going to be a little bit less dangerous, and I think we could see Zalal take over with his wrestling, take over with his range, take over with his length in rounds 2 and 3. And I really don't think this fight's going to decision. I really like the jiu-jitsu, the darts chokes. I really like what I've seen from Zalal on the mat. So I think we're going to see a wrestling base kind of Zalal here. So I think he's going to submit Austin Lingo in the 2nd or 3rd round here. So yeah, I'm going with the upset here. I'm going with the underdog. I believe Youseff Zalal is going to finish Austin Lingo in the 2nd round via submission.